In the waning years of the 14th century, Christendom faced a formidable and expanding power in the East. The Ottoman Empire, under the ambitious and brilliant Sultan Bayezid I, had relentlessly pushed its borders into the Balkans. His moniker, Yildirim, or the Thunderbolt, was earned through the speed and ferocity of his military campaigns. The pivotal Ottoman victory at the Battle of Kosovo in 1389 had shattered Serbian power and opened the floodgates for further conquest. The Kingdom of Hungary, now a frontier state, felt the immense pressure of the Ottoman advance. King Sigismund of Hungary, a future Holy Roman Emperor, knew that his realm alone could not stem the tide. He dispatched desperate pleas to the courts of Western Europe, calling for a unified stand against the encroaching threat. The once mighty Byzantine Empire, now a shadow of its former self, was virtually encircled and teetering on the brink of collapse. In Rome, Pope Boniface IX answered the call, officially sanctioning a new crusade to defend Christendom's eastern flank. The response from the chivalry of Europe, particularly from France, was enthusiastic and overwhelming. A massive Crusader army began to assemble, a glittering host of knights, soldiers and adventurers from across the continent. The French contingent was the largest and most splendid, led by the young and impetuous John, Count of Nevers. As the son of the Duke of Burgundy, he was one of the most powerful nobles in Europe, later to be known as John the Fearless. He was accompanied by a retinue of France's greatest military leaders, including the Marshal of France, Jean-Raymond, known as Boucicaut, knights from England, Germany, Bohemia, and the Knights Hospitaller of Rhodes also joined the growing army. Venetian and Genoese fleets controlled the Danube, providing logistical support and a potential escape route. Mircea the Elder, the voivode of Wallachia, brought his own experienced forces, men who understood Ottoman tactics well. However, this grand coalition was plagued by a fatal flaw, a profound lack of unified command. The French knights, in particular, were driven by a quest for personal glory and held the cautious Sigismund in disdain. They viewed the campaign not as a grim war for survival, but as a chivalric adventure, a tournament on a grand scale. Their arrogance was boundless. They believed no army on earth could stand against the flower of French chivalry. Sigismund, who had direct experience fighting the Ottomans, repeatedly warned against underestimating the Sultan. His advice to let the Hungarian and Wallachian troops, who were more familiar with Ottoman tactics, take the vanguard was arrogantly dismissed. The French insisted that they, as the most prestigious contingent, must have the honor of leading the first charge. Meanwhile, Sultan Bayezid, who had been besieging Constantinople, was fully aware of the approaching Crusader host. He abandoned the siege and, with the incredible speed that defined his rule, force marched his army west to confront the threat. His army was a professional and disciplined force, a stark contrast to the feudal disorganization of the Crusaders. It comprised elite Janissary infantry, formidable Sipahi heavy cavalry, and masses of irregular light infantry known as Azabs. The Crusader campaign began by moving down the Danube, a path marked by early and brutal success. They reached the Bulgarian city of Vidin, which surrendered without a fight. Their next target was Rahova, or Oryahovo, which they took by storm after a fierce battle. In a fateful decision, fueled by crusading zeal and fury, the French led a massacre of the captured Turkish and Bulgarian inhabitants. This act of barbarity enraged Bayezid and ensured that no mercy would be shown in the future. Finally, the Crusader army arrived at the formidable fortress of Nicopolis, a key Ottoman stronghold on the Danube. Believing Bayezid to be weeks away, they settled in for a leisurely and complacent siege. They lacked heavy siege equipment, expecting to simply starve the garrison out. The discipline within the camp dissolved into feasting and games. Scouts sent out by Sigismund returned with no news of the Sultan's army, reinforcing the false sense of security. Then, on the morning of September 25th, 1396, the impossible happened. The vanguard of the Ottoman army appeared on the hills to the south of the Crusader camp. Bayezid had arrived. Panic and disbelief swept through the Crusader encampment. In the ensuing war council, the fatal divisions of the army came to a head. Sigismund proposed a cautious plan. Let his Wallachian and Transylvanian foot soldiers engage the Ottoman skirmishers first. He knew the Ottomans often placed their weakest troops in front to exhaust the enemy's initial charge. The French, however, would have none of it. Accusing Sigismund of trying to steal their glory, they demanded the right to lead the attack. Without waiting for a coordinated plan, the French knights mounted their horses. A sea of steel and colorful banners. The French vanguard began their glorious and foolish charge. They thundered up the slope towards the Ottoman lines, a magnificent and terrifying sight. They easily crashed through the first line of terrified Azap infantry, who were never meant to hold them. Intoxicated by their initial success, they pressed on, believing victory was at hand. But Bayezid was a master tactician. As the French charge crested the hill, they were met with a horrific surprise. The charge, which relied on momentum, was brutally halted. Horses screamed and fell, and the magnificent armored knights were thrown into a tangled, helpless mass. Forced to dismount and fight on foot in their heavy armor, they were now exhausted and disorganized. It was at this moment that Bayezid played his trump card. Over the crest of the hill marched the Janissaries, the Sultan's elite infantry. They were fresh, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. They unleashed volleys of arrows and engaged the exhausted knights in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The French, despite their bravery, were being systematically cut down. Seeing the disaster unfolding, King Sigismund led the main body of the Crusader army forward to rescue the French. The battle now became a general engagement, a swirling melee of immense scale. For a time, the fighting was evenly matched, a desperate struggle in the center of the field. But Bayezid had one more surprise. He unleashed his heavy cavalry, the Sipahis, who had been held in reserve on the flanks. Simultaneously, the Ottoman Serbian vassal, Stefan Lazarevich, led his contingent of knights in a decisive charge. This flanking maneuver completely enveloped the Crusader army. The Crusader lines, pressed from the front and now attacked from the sides and rear, began to buckle. The Wallachian contingent under Mircea the Elder, seeing the battle was lost, chose to withdraw their forces to save their men. Panic turned into a full-blown rout. Knights and soldiers alike fled for their lives, trying to get back to the Danube and the safety of the Venetian ships. King Sigismund fought bravely but was eventually forced to flee. He managed to reach a Venetian galley, which carried him away from the catastrophic defeat. His escape was a bitter one, as he watched the destruction of his army from the safety of the river. The aftermath of the battle was a scene of unparalleled horror. Thousands of Crusaders were taken prisoner, including the flower of French nobility. John, Count of Nevers, Marshal Boucicaut, and many other high-ranking nobles were among the captives. Sultan Bayezid, enraged by the memory of the Rahova massacre, walked the battlefield. Upon seeing the scale of his own losses, his fury became boundless. He ordered the execution of almost all the common prisoners. The next day, thousands of captive Crusaders were systematically beheaded in front of the Sultan. The noble prisoners, including John of Nevers, were spared, but only for the prospect of a massive ransom. The ransom paid for their release would be one of the largest in medieval history, crippling the finances of their families. The defeat at Nicopolis was a devastating blow to the morale of Christendom. It effectively ended the era of large-scale, pan-European crusades against the Ottomans. Never again would such a grand army from the west march to confront the Sultan. For the Ottomans, it was a monumental triumph. The victory solidified their control over the Balkans for centuries to come. The Second Bulgarian Empire was completely extinguished, its fate sealed by the Crusader defeat. The Byzantine Empire was left more isolated and vulnerable than ever before. The road to the fall of Constantinople in 1453 was now significantly clearer for the Ottomans. The Battle of Nicopolis served as a harsh lesson in military reality. It demonstrated that the feudal chivalry of the West, with its emphasis on individual glory, was no match for the disciplined, professional army of the Ottomans. The Crusaders' arrogance, poor discipline, and tactical naivety led them directly to their doom. They had underestimated their enemy, and they paid the ultimate price. The thunderbolt had struck, and an entire generation of European nobility was shattered in its wake.